Krishna reveals the mystery of Pope's sins. President Trump is correct and Pope is wrong. Pope is wrong. Christianity cannot hide behind its sins of Pope in Rome. World doesn't know the atrocities committed by the Pope. Let me just give you one example, and this is true. In the 14th century in England, and prior to that as well, but certainly I'm citing example of 14th century in UK, in England, they had to obey anything and everything which the Pope dictated from Rome. That was the power of the Pope in UK. If they didn't obey it, they would be hanged or they would be burnt alive. This was the reality in UK about the Pope's atrocities. The world has forgotten that. This is just the tip of the iceberg which I am citing as an example. There's a lot more detailed story which started the Reformation or the Protestants movement, people who are protesting against Pope's power in England and in London. The Roman army of Pope would invade, come in. They would come into houses and they would take children and make them or convert them into monks. They wanted them to be monks. They had the power to forcibly adopt and force people to comply with the papal doctrines. Such was the power and the force and the venom of the Pope and the Rome behind that. Taking them away, the families were very unhappy that the children were forcibly taken away by Pope's army, away from the education, away from the family lives, from parents' wishes. Pope had given them powers so they could redeem their sins in exchange for monies. This accelerated the vices. Have you heard of anything more ridiculous? You pay money to redeem your sins? King Constantine, who changed from the 3rd century, that he introduced the cardinals, bishops, and the Christian priests. Well, there was one Britisher who literally stood 10 feet tall. His name was John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe was a philosopher at Oxford Universities, and he started these Protestant revolutions. In those days, they were not even allowed to keep the Bible. It was only on the handful of few. He wrote the very first Bible in English. But to make the matters worse, he was persecuted throughout, and he never detracted from his purpose, which is that people have a right to pray to God without interference from the Pope or the Church, to dictate from the Pope how people should pray. He felt people were following this symbolic worship. All these Pope's followers were rich, when the rest of the people, the peasants, were poor. It was rich versus the poor, and this was unfair. And he started this revolution from Oxford University, and it continued all over UK and in Europe as well. You won't believe what happened. 30 years after his death, even while he was alive, they tried to prosecute him, but lucky for the king was in favor of John Wiley. But 30 years after his death, the Pope's army of followers came and dug up his grave, and the bones which they found in the grave, they took them and threw them in the River Severn in Bristol, so that all the bones, there would be no trace of the rebel. This was the punishment from Rome and Pope. Such was the fear on the ordinary people, and needed a lot of guts to stand up and fight against them. Romans would come and chase the people, the families. They had no choice but to run. They had to hide in the forest. They lived in the forest. This is the same plight which Mool Nivasis had to face in India. They ran away out in the forest, in the jungle. They don't have any land. They don't have any money. They don't have any rights. And the people whose land it was not, many of them Brahmins, they acquired the land. They acquired wealth. They become rich. And this is the injustice. Don't forget, this is the Muslim invaders, the conquerors, the butchers who came in and did that. And the Mool Nivasis suffered, and they're still poor to this day. It's the Mool Nivasis who had no rights then, no land, no monies, and the ones who were aliens or foreigners had the money and the land. Now, if you're a creator of a university or God, who will you favor? Britishers who stood 10 feet tall, would not budge from their principles of righteousness and freedom of expression and freedom to worship? Or would you worship the Christian Pope or the Muslims' dictates from Mecca? This happened in India as well. Indians were forcibly converted to Islam and then to follow the Muslims' rule and Islam and Quranic dictates. This was the brutality of the Muslims' rule in India. Britishers had to follow the Pope's dictates. They couldn't even keep the Bible in their homes. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I'll reveal more as we go along. John Wycliffe in UK, in England, or anybody who protests against the Pope's power, this is the punishment. They were meted out for anyone who rebelled against Pope's rule from Rome. And one day I'll reveal the story of how 3 top philosophers from Oxford and Cambridge University were burned alive at Baylor College in Oxford. They refused to cave in. They refused to surrender. This should be a lesson for the coward Brahmins of India who surrendered no self-respect with your belief in God or gods. You must have the guts to stand up for what you believe in. This is why you see British stood tall and they're respected by Creator and God. And you Brahmins, you fail. You fell from grace because of your cowardice. Don't have the guts to stand up for what you believe in. You'll change the party just to save your backside.